Okay, let's discuss the very important, not so fun, but very important topic of appraisals. Hey, Lily with Living Room Realty here in Portland, Oregon. So appraisals are a big topic now in our real estate market and probably every real estate market because we are seeing such large jumps in home prices. So a list price, what the property is listed at by the seller, and then what it actually sells for the most part, has seen significant jumps here in the last few years as demand for properties has been so high. With that comes the issue of appraisal. So the appraiser is a third party that comes in to the real estate transaction and designates whether the home is worth the amount of money the buyer is offering for the property, is looking to purchase the property for. Why they are doing this is so that the lender, who is also part of the transaction, will know whether or not they could assume that property if the buyer were to default on their loan and therefore, recoup the money they lent to that buyer. That's why we had all those issues in 2008, lending to people that didn't have the ability to pay for the houses, and then home prices went below that, but whole different topic. And with all of that, so when the appraiser comes in, obviously when you see it closer to the list price and comparable properties in the area, it's pretty cut and dry. They can go, okay, we see that this house, you're buying it for $20,000 over the list price. And we see that houses sold within that range in the last few months, but we're not having that right now in current market. I'll say to buyers very openly, I can show you the comparable properties from a month ago, but this is the price we're gonna need to offer because simply that's just where things are at the moment. And we need to get you into a property. So a lot of the time you're offering at an inflated price of what the value actually is in order to win, because that's what other buyers are doing. And it's just where demand is right now. And hopefully we'll get back to a more balanced market that is more sensible, but this is where we're at. And luckily, most appraisers also know this to some degree. They're definitely not going to just let you buy a house at any number, but they do understand that somewhat of an inflated price is needed and that home prices are changing month to month, where a comp from the month before, a comparable property from the month before, might not equate to what you're buying a house at this month. But with that being said, a lot of the time they are going to still argue, hey, I see that you had to offer this price to win the property, but we do not agree that it has the same value. So the price that the appraisal is at does not meet the price that you had for your offer. And let's talk about what happens in that scenario. So in a scenario like this, where let's say you offer $600K on a house that was listed for $525, the appraiser comes in and says, look, I get it, but I believe this house is only worth $575. So there's that discrepancy of $25,000. Within that, there are a few options of what you can do. One, you can contest the appraisal. You can say to the appraiser, hey, I believe that the house is actually worth this based on market trends. What is actually the reality of this market? And hopefully be able to provide some comparable properties to them. I was in a meeting the other day that was interesting where a loan officer was talking about being able to also contend that the appraiser doesn't have market knowledge, and that's usually something you do kind of pre the thing, but interesting, and I'll talk about that's a whole nother video. We'll not go into that. But basically, yeah, you can contest the appraisal, which honestly isn't going to be the most successful thing, and maybe you can get it arranged to where they'll say, okay, fine, it's worth $585, or they're not gonna maybe fully get you to where you need to be based on the amount of effort you're gonna put in there, but it is an option and does work sometimes. Usually if it's a little bit more of a less discrepancy. I had one come up the other day where it was like a $1,500 difference, and I was like, come on, like just whatever. We're dealing with it. And in this, similar to this case, what we are doing are the other two options, which are to give the seller start negotiations with the seller to bring the price down. So you say with the seller, hey, we wrote you an offer at $600K, appraiser saying it's worth $575. So we need to lower the price to that appraised value of $575. Negotiate with them, you sign an addendum, easy peasy, goes off, you're buying the house at a new price, good for you, a lesser price. Obviously, a lot of sellers aren't super big fans of this, especially if they had other offers around that same price. And where this option comes into play a lot in our current market is a lot of the time in the beginning and on really, really competitive properties, sellers are actually asking you as a buyer to provide an appraisal gap, which means you are going to say, because I am offering 50, 100K over asking up to a certain amount of money, I am going to protect the appraised value and I will offer $10, $20, $30,000 of my own money if appraisal comes in low and putting that towards my loan. So, it doesn't have to be the full amount. Let's say, in that case where it's a 25% different or $25,000 difference, you would say at the beginning of the contract, well, I agree to pay 10K of that. At least that 10K you are then obligated to give to the loan, and then you can negotiate the rest of it or bring the rest of cash, whatever the situation is. And I say all this as this is a normal part of the market right now on highly competitive properties. We are seeing it more and more as a need, even, just becoming more of a thing. It really wasn't like 2 years ago. This wasn't even part of our market that much. And now it's just kind of standard practice. But I always want to give the caveat, if you don't have a bunch of extra cash, I work a lot with first-time home buyers that don't just have a buttload of cash to throw at deals. This isn't always necessary. It's just something you want to be aware of and have expectations around, so that if it comes down to where you're like, hey, I don't have a bunch of extra cash to throw at a deal, then I'm going to exclude properties that I believe would need these terms. So properties that are seen as like shiny object houses is what I like to call them, where they have like the really cool backsplash, the cool staging, all the stuff that's going to attract a bunch of people. It's in the really cool neighborhood that is going to give them 10, 15 offers to where they're going to start going, well, hey, this is where prices are. It's 100K over asking. We're going to need to see an appraisal gap. Those are the houses we're not going to want to see, or we're going to see and get in that situation and learn by practice and then go, okay, this house we thought wasn't the coolest, but because of the neighborhood it's in or whatever, it's requiring that, we're going to go look elsewhere. And it's all just strategy. It's all just learning as we go, or learning from my experience. That's why you have a realtor working with you and kind of navigating those options. So with that, as I kind of mentioned, your last option is to bring the cash forward yourself. So in cases where we know ahead of time it might be necessary, you're going to tell the seller, hey, I can bring X amount of money to the table in the circumstance where an appraisal gap occurs. Or, like I said, I had a scenario with some clients recently where it was like a very small amount of money in the grand scheme relative to real estate, a small amount of money. They are able to negotiate with the seller and get the price down, or they're just going to bring that money to the table because it's doable for them based on how much it is. So sometimes it's a mix of both. Sometimes it's one or the other, or you're talking with the appraiser. But I know that was a lot. I know appraisal, it's not the simplest thing. So I hope that all made sense. And I hope this was helpful to you. It's almost about 8 minutes on this video. So I'm gonna stop it here. And if you have any questions on appraisals, I know this is a question that comes up for sellers as well, but home buyers, home sellers, I am here to chat with you and be a resource to you. Feel free to contact me at the information I have below. Send me a message, all of those fun things, and look forward to talking with you. Thanks.